So now, with that, please join me in welcoming our presenters.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rick Rose, and I'd like to welcome you all to this session. Our presentation today arises from our experience helping the homeless with basic life-saving, life-sustaining activities in the city of Puyallup. Puyallup is a Native American word for the tribe that first inhabited the South Puget Sound region, and it means land of generous and welcoming people. Our goal today is to provide you with a toolbox of sorts for dealing with complex legal and political issues that can arise in our communities and cities when people try to respond compassionately and justly to this growing humanitarian crisis in our midst, that is homelessness. And with the eviction surge looming on the horizon, the time is now to build the necessary infrastructure, including housing, shelter, and services in our cities. How did I get involved? About 8 years ago, I was driving back from a Social Security hearing in Seattle with my disabled client who was homeless. She was living under the bridge that crosses the Puyallup River between Puyallup and Sumner. When I asked her what she does in the wintertime, she told me about the Freezing Nights program, where a dozen churches or so in and around the Puyallup area provide overnight shelter for the homeless on a rotating basis. It started over 15 years ago and was meant to be a temporary emergency stopgap measure until the city of Puyallup could do something more permanent. One of the founders of the Freezing Nights program was Ted Brackman. Ted died earlier this year, and I would like to just take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank Ted for his tireless advocacy in Puyallup on behalf of people without homes. Our first presenter is Paula Anderson, the director at the New Hope Resource Center. She will be giving the client perspective in these presentations. But first, here is a short video of Paula speaking about New Hope's latest endeavor, the Mobile Resources Response Team. Her presentation will follow the video. Please note we will have 25 minutes or so at the end of the presentation for questions and answers, though feel free to type in questions as they occur to you throughout the presentations. Thank you, and here's the video.
Hi, my name is Paula Anderson, and I work with the New Hope Resource Center in downtown Puyallup, and we are a daytime drop-in shelter for adult homeless. We've been serving the greater Puyallup area in East Pierce County for the last 8 years. Last year during COVID, the county came up with some grant money, and we saw that as a great opportunity to start a mobile outreach team, which is something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. One of the biggest issues that homeless have is trying to get to the location of services, and so having a mobile unit which provides essential services, basic needs, and being able to bring that to locations where they are camping or living is something that is a really good opportunity for them. So we had received grant money from the county last year to purchase this mobile unit, which is the first one of its kind in Pierce County. We have an RV, which is a 40-foot RV, which is our mobile office. We have computers in that, as well as a printer. We carry food, supplies, things of that nature to be able to give out to folks that we serve. We also have a laundry trailer and a separate shower trailer. Both of those items are things that are very well received by the homeless in our community. It's something that they don't have access to on a regular basis, and quite literally being able to take a shower and get clean and then also have clean clothes is an attitude changer for people. So it gives them hope. We like to think that we're hope and dignity on wheels with this mobile unit. This definitely is a ministry, a God-directed ministry. We would not have this mobile unit if it wasn't for God's intervention in all aspects of how we put this thing together. The money that we received in the grant was enough to purchase empty trailers and the RV, and God blessed us with people that built these trailers who went to their vendors and put everything inside we believe that the cost of the mobile unit right now, or the value of it right now, is about $250,000. And most of that was donations from very kind-hearted business people and people who understood that some way, shape, or form they had to step up. It definitely is a calling. This is a ministry that takes people from all walks of life as volunteers to come in and just kind of let go of their expectations of what they can do and just meet people in the moment and do what they can for them on that day. And I think that that's the most impactful thing that we can do.
So my name's Paula Anderson, and we should be having the PowerPoint presentation put up here. There it is. Just going to run through this quickly. So our mission at New Hope, and we actually started with a brick and mortar building back in 2014, but our mission is to be a welcoming place for adult homeless, where all guests are treated with respect and are connected with resources to help them find ways out of homelessness. Next. We have a 501c3 called Homeward in Puyallup. It provides structured administrative oversight for both New Hope Resource Center, our mobile resources response team, and for the Freezing Nights Ministry, which is an emergency overnight shelter through a network of churches for adult homeless. That ministry actually was the first one under this, and it has actually been going for about 17 years. The only year it hasn't gone is last year because of COVID. Next. Again, starting in 2014, Good Friday weekend, we had a group of citizens led by one of our local pediatricians, Ovidio Penalver, who is a great advocate of social justice for the less fortunate. They were compelled to find a location for the homeless in our community so that they could rest during the day. With the Freezing Nights program, which I don't have on this slide, but the Freezing Nights program, they had a place overnight, but then were released to the street at 7 a.m. and had no place to go. So we looked for 21 properties, and then the current site was something that was affordable for us. And so we opened our doors on November 1st, 2014, All Saints Day. And we were used as a pickup drop-off point for Freezing Nights during the season that they run. So our intake process is very simple. Sorry, next. Our intake process is very simple. New guests are required to fill out our intake form. We run a background check because we have volunteers that come in that are either from churches or children sometimes. Because we do like to get the whole community involved. We do have a certain set of guidelines that they need to meet. So we take a copy of their ID, a photo for each person is taken, and then our goal is to, within 7 to 10 days, to meet with one of our resource navigators who helps to go deeper into the details of what the person is suffering, what type of barriers they have, and then to set a personal plan for improving their stability and opportunity for housing. Next. Once the barriers to housing and stability are identified, each person continues to work with a resource navigator to mitigate those barriers and work through their own personal plan. Among other things, this may include meeting with other service providers to qualify for and obtain housing, scheduling mental health, dental or doctor's appointments, employment search, resume assistance, legal services, court appointments, disability claims, assistance with obtaining ID, and next, assistance with transportation to treatment, medical appointments, housing or job opportunities, community service opportunities, and then build relationships. That's our primary goal, is to build our relationships with them and connect them with the other service providers. If we talk to a person when they first walk in and tell them, I know you need to go to treatment and then you need to get into clean and stable housing, if that's the very first time we meet, we're not going to get through to them. We have to build that relationship, and that's what we built our program on. As each barrier is removed or mitigated, our guests move closer to stability and housing. Next. We have a whole bunch of service providers and a network that we have built over this last almost 8 years that are people that help us do the work. Not one single agency can do everything for a person who is on the street. There's many different stories, many different circumstances. So we work with a bunch of them. Coordinated entry system is something that we have here in Washington State that helps people get on a housing list, if you will, and also connected to other resources. So we facilitate that. We work with behavioral health teams. We work with PATH teams. The Greater Lakes PATH team is a primary resource that we use. They actually go into encampments and bring people out or provide services to them there. We meet them in different locations and help with that. The CMAR chat team is something that is new that actually has a nurse practitioner that goes into encampments. That is a brand new program in this county, and one that many other states are looking at because it's working so well. Our folks don't have an opportunity to get into the services that they need. We work with DSHS, hospital social workers, the county, police departments and sheriff's departments in the area, DOC, a couple of work source agencies, crisis intervention, the DCRs, detox and treatment programs. We provide the transportation and things to get to those different ones. And we also work with veterans. We've had a lot of veterans come through. Next. So these are some of the questions that we dealt with. When we first opened New Hope, our community in Puyallup was a very conservative, not very well educated in the aspects of homelessness, the barriers, who is homeless. They had the typical conception that it's the drunken male, about 45 years old, who is sitting in a corner and is completely dirty and doesn't, have any hope of getting out of the situation. So when we had a presentation to the community, these were some of the questions that we got. And as you read through, and I'll just name a few of these, you can see what level of discrimination and how far off their thinking was in this little community that all of a sudden had homelessness to deal with. So they wanted to know if we bus them in from other areas. And of course, no, we don't do that. They wanted to know how the homeless came to New Hope, and we gave them that information. How do they hear about it? We talked to them about that. Question, do we allow them to do or sell drugs on the property? Well, no, that's not part of what we do, but that was a misconception that was out there. Does New Hope advertise to other shelters and agencies? That's on the next slide, sorry about that. To bring the homeless here. No, that's not what we do. They talked about, there was a big rumor going on that we had local schools on lockdown because of our facility. That is untrue, but people, these are the kinds of things that you sometimes deal with, especially when you have a smaller community. We wanted to put these here just so that you could see what we were dealing with when we finally did end up going into litigation. So we can go on to the next slide. We do serve people with addictions. We help people get housed. If you're not going to let people who have needs, which can include mental health issues, addiction issues, you're not going to let them in to work with them. They're not going to have any kind of way to remove their barriers and get into housing. So we do work with all of those types of people. Next page. We serve veterans, like I said earlier. We are part of the county-wide effort to end homelessness. We've been working very closely with the county for the last 5 years. And it's interesting to note that the county in those last 5 years has been willing to fund us with funds every year when the city of Puyallup, where we're based, has not been willing to do that. We do offer now showers and laundry services with our mobile unit. As you saw in the video, we have a shower trailer and a laundry trailer. This was in part as a sanitation measure for COVID specific, but then long-term, this is something that is needed in our county because we do not have enough shelter space. We do not have enough low-income housing. We don't even have enough tiny homes or micro housing available for people that are on the street. Right now, we do not know how many people we have on the street. Next slide. So one of the other questions that we dealt with are people expecting that when somebody came in and told us, we're ready, I'm ready to go to treatment, that we would automatically be able to put the person in treatment that day. It never happens that way. We have to schedule the detox. They have to have an assessment and getting into a program, because there are so few programs in the area. It often takes 2 to 3 weeks to get a bed date, is what we call it, a bed date to get somebody into treatment. And so we're dealing with all the emotions that arise with that when we have a client who has an addiction and is on one day is ready to do it. 3 weeks later could be a completely different mindset and they could be very discouraged. So that's a difficult part of what we're trying to do, but we do the best that we can. And we have been successful at doing it. So the last few questions, who are the homeless in Pierce County? These are just some stats. 41% are women, 8% are veterans, 24% are adults, survivors of domestic violence. 50% are people of color. 26% are considered chronically homeless. And of those homeless individuals reporting a disability, 41% were suffering from mental illness. I can tell you just from the people that we receive at New Hope, our stats probably run about 50% that have some sort of mental health illness or diagnosis. Many of them, especially the women, have PTSD from being out on the street, being assaulted, being unsafe. And so those are huge issues. 20% reported substance abuse issues. That number is a little bit low, I think. A lot of times people go homeless first and then become addicted because that is a coping technique that they are using for the trauma that they're experiencing on the street. And 11% have identified as having a developmental disability. Those are some of the stark facts of the population that we serve. New Hope is continuing to do the work that we're doing despite outbursts from the community and every now and then a real hateful email or Facebook post. I believe more people in the community are now more educated and at least willing to listen and learn about the homeless in our community because we were put there. And that is the biggest gift that we can give to our community is education, is what I believe. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. I often say Paula has a faith that can move a mountain. Mm-hmm. I would like to now introduce John Purbaugh, the managing attorney at the Tacoma and Bremerton offices of the Northwest Justice Project, and he's the lead attorney for Homeward Bound in Puyallup. Simply said, the doors of the New Hope Resource Center would not be open today without the effective legal advocacy of John and the Northwest Justice Project. John is one of the best attorneys I've ever worked with. and it has been my pleasure and privilege to work with him as both a colleague and a client. John?
Thanks, Rick, and thank you, Paula, for that inspiring story. The New Hope success story includes some bumps in the road. As Paula mentioned, there were a number of reactions to their emergence in 2014, and I became involved together with other colleagues at Northwest Justice Project on New Hope's behalf about 2 years later in the spring of 2016. So we'll go through a series of slides here that will summarize sort of the lawyer's perspective and role on representing an organization that serves homeless people. NJP, of course, represents individual homeless people on a variety of issues, some directly connected to their homelessness and others just regular legal issues that happen to crop up for people who are homeless. But this was our first in-depth work with a provider of services to the homeless, and we learned quite a bit from it. And the purpose of this presentation is to convey a couple messages. One, legal aid lawyers can and do represent groups as well as individuals, and in doing so can help affect change in the communities where those groups are active. And two is that pro bono assistance is sometimes needed to carry this work off, and it's also available. And so I'll give a local perspective on that, and then I'll be followed by someone who can offer a national perspective, I believe. So as you heard Paula talk about the New Hope Resource Center, this is where it was located at 414 Spring Street in Puyallup when it opened. I've given you this aerial so that you can see that the surrounding uses are mostly parking lots and the railroad track. At that time, it served between 45 and 70 adults a day, and it did the sort of work Paula described. I'll not go into greater detail. It was the only center or shelter in Eastern Pierce County at the time. Next slide, please. So you heard Paula offer a little bit about the community reaction and the city's response. I'm going to go over these because they led directly to the issues that cropped up in litigation and legal representation. There were, of course, concerns regarding crime and the reaction people have to the visible poverty of homelessness. There was opposition to behavior that some people characterized as enabling homeless people. Most notably in my mind was the notion that if you build it, meaning you open doors to a daytime drop-in center, they will come, as opposed to the need being present that the center was responding to. The city's response to these complaints varied over time, but I think that the city came to regret having granted the necessary permits to New Hope to open when it converted a former Domino's Pizza building into its present use. At the time New Hope opened and made that conversion, there were no city zoning regulations that were specific to homelessness or to homeless service providers. But shortly after New Hope opened and this wave of community reaction developed, the city enacted the first of a series of 6 moratoria on any new centers or shelters being opened. The result was that during a time period when homelessness was growing, not only in this suburban city, but throughout the region and county, no additional services could be brought on the line if they required a physical location or needed zoning approval. The city also adopted some new business licensing proposals aimed specifically at homeless service providers, and it adopted new zoning laws. This led New Hope to deal with these problems through litigation, both in a responsive and in an affirmative way on both licensing and zoning issues. Next slide, please. So the city had a pre-existing significant impact business ordinance, which deemed certain businesses to have adverse impacts because of their nature. Hazardous waste and explosive manufacturers, airports, etc. were on that list. In April 2016, the city amended its existing significant impact business ordinance to add providers of social services to the homeless or formerly homeless people to the list. So Paula and the work she was doing with volunteers at New Hope became acquainted with explosives, hazardous waste, airports, and other high impact businesses. The result of this was that the city, under this ordinance, had the authority to require New Hope to mitigate its impacts through a variety of means. The city ended up requiring them to hire a security guard, to build a site obscuring fence, and do a bunch of other things that really were unaffordable and could have meant that New Hope was required to close rather than fulfill these requirements. Next slide, please. So New Hope did what businesses who disagree with city business licensing conditions do. They appealed those conditions to the city's hearing examiner. This was not an ordinary hearing. It lasted 6 days. I think there were 10 witnesses. There were about 4,000 pages of exhibits and resulted in a 1,300-page transcript. Everybody was clearly making a record for whatever might be next. The hearing examiner's decision reversed the security guard requirement, but affirmed the other conditions. This hearing process was a significant one for NJP, Northwest Justice Project, and our Tacoma office to undertake. I was assisted by Jennifer Bell, my longtime colleague in litigation on these issues, and our legal assistant, Evan Purcell. It was a great learning experience for us. And unfortunately, the result was a mixed outcome. Next slide, please. Of course, when one disagrees with a hearing examiner's decision, there are further remedies available. In this circumstance, it's under the Land Use Petition Act, which is a chapter of the Revised Code of Washington that allows people who disagree with a hearing examiner's decision for a city on a land use matter to go to Superior Court. Well, the city had said this wasn't land use, it was business licensing. But from the business end of the business licensing, it felt a whole lot like conditions on land use that could have, but were not imposed when New Hope first opened because there was no zoning scheme that provided for these sorts of things. So our theory was that the significant impact business licensing conditions regulated the use of land and were reviewable in Superior Court under the Land Use Petition Act. And if not, there was another way to be heard. The city's request to have the case thrown out were denied by the Superior Court. And so the city went and the Superior Court certified the question to the Court of Appeals on a discretionary review basis. That's an interlocutory appeal before the case is heard on the full merits. Next slide. Meanwhile, that's not all that's going on. So we're in the Court of Appeals and Superior Court on business licensing. After six consecutive 180-day moratoria on any new services for the homeless, the city finally adopted a new zoning scheme for day centers and overnight shelters serving the homelessness. This is a map of the city of Puyallup, and the highlighted blue area are the areas where these centers and shelters were allowed by this new permitting scheme in city zoning code. It was a total of 42 parcels of land at most in the northwest corner of the city across the river, not served by public transportation, remote from other services in the center of the city. And the zoning scheme also imposed very onerous procedural and submittal requirements and resulted in New Hope, which was not located within this area, becoming a non-conforming use, which has a lot of significant negative consequences for a business who's no longer allowed on a prospective basis to do what they've been doing on property they own and are invested in. Next slide, please. So New Hope decided to challenge the city's zoning ordinance before the Growth Management Hearings Board. This is an administrative board that has the authority to reject or remand or invalidate city ordinances if they violate the Growth Management Act. The Growth Management Act was adopted in I think the early 90s to achieve some unity and consistency between jurisdictions on how they regulated land use, particularly for things that were necessary and important in the community. If we could go back to the prior slide. Thank you. We had two theories in front of the Growth Management Hearings Board. One was that this zoning ordinance was inconsistent with the city's own comprehensive plan, which is the grand design by which the city says it will allow housing, transportation, and other infrastructure to be developed and integrate and relate to each other. And second, that centers and shelters qualified as something the Growth Management Act calls essential public facilities. Such facilities may still be regulated, but they're protected by the GMA from being precluded by city or county regulations that make them impossible to develop in practice. Now, if we could go to the next slide. So we've got these two things working in parallel. We're in Superior Court and the Court of Appeals on the significant impact business license, and we're in the Growth Management Hearing Board on the zoning matters. And it all comes crashing together, which is what tends to happen when one is involved in litigation and a number of dynamic factors are in play. So we did what anyone does when faced with significant challenges and doing everything at the same time. We got help. And I'm pleased to say we were able to get help from a variety of places. First of all, from our own staff in the Tacoma office, who did other work that we couldn't do while we were working on this and who helped with the case. From other NJP staff around the state in various offices and places with various pieces of expertise and the ability to consult helpfully. And finally, from pro bono land use attorneys at the Gordon Thomas firm, Margaret Archer and Bill Lynn in particular. Next slide, please. So the Growth Management Act Board found that the city's zoning ordinance for centers and shelters was inconsistent with the city's own comp plan policies, requiring it to promote and encourage these sorts of things and to locate centers and shelters near transit centers and with other pedestrian facilities. But the board did not reach the essential public facility issue. Next slide. So what's happened with that is that when the board sent the ordinance back to the city amended it and allowed centers and shelters in some additional locations. The board thought this was enough to comply with the GMA, and the Superior Court agreed. We're currently on appeal in the Court of Appeals on that matter. Next slide. Meanwhile, the city decided it would no longer have the significant impact business license ordinance and adopted an ordinance repealing it. And with that, the lawsuit went away. Next slide. So that's a win in a non-traditional way. The city just decided it would no longer use the significant impact business license mechanism to address its concerns about how New Hope and other homeless service providers operated. It instead adopted a chronic nuisance ordinance, which is something that exists in other jurisdictions. It basically defines different categories of nuisances, including what it calls felony and misdemeanor incidents, which don't have to require a conviction. So, this is part of what the future holds. The city has contracted with a Tacoma shelter for beds. This may raise Martin v. Boise issues. Martin v. Boise is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision in which a city in Idaho's scheme for prosecuting people who violated public vagrancy laws was overturned, and they were basically the ruling was you couldn't enforce those laws unless people had a shelter bed. The city has opened an overnight shelter in response to COVID in a hotel building, and the future of that is in the air. And of course, most recently in the legislature just this year, House Bill 1220 has amended the Growth Management Act and the Zoning Authority Statute to require code cities like Puyallup to allow centers and shelters in all zones where hotels are allowed. So I think the future portends some change. Puyallup has, however, adopted a new 180-day moratorium on any new centers or shelters. Next slide, please. So I think we learned a lot from this as lawyers representing clients. First of all, I personally learned a lot about the range of responses to the visible poverty of homelessness that one sees. The compassion and love and response that you see described by the work Paula does and others who work with her. Fear or even revulsion and separation and other forms of discrimination or distancing that has emerged in response to that work. I was reminded that organizational clients come through prior community relationships. I had prior working relationships with Rick and other members of the Puyallup community, and that's really how I ended up being involved. As Rick pointed out, representing a provider helps ensure their clients continue to get services. One of the questions we face in legal aid is always, are we having any impact with the work we do? I think we've been able to do that here through the simple measure of helping keep New Hope functioning and providing these services in the community. We learned a lot about what was going on behind the scenes by watching what was publicly available in council video and public records. And we were very gratified to get pro bono assistance from firms and sole practitioners along the way as needed. That's really the end of what I have to offer. I'd be happy to try to answer questions at the end as part of the group question session. Thanks for your time and attention, and best wishes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tristia Bauman. I'm a senior attorney at the National Homelessness Law Center, formerly known as the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty. We are the national legal organization whose sole mission is to prevent and end homelessness using the power of the law. And next slide, please. And I think where John ended is a great segue into the presentation that I'm going to give you. What you're hearing is that people doing great work for very vulnerable neighbors of ours, people like Paula and Rick, are targeted by local policies that are intended to, frankly, stamp out those services, usually because homelessness is misunderstood, homeless people are misunderstood, and the role of services in a given community is misunderstood. Along with service providers being targeted, homeless people are increasingly targeted such that they cannot lawfully live in now a majority of our local communities, and those numbers are going up under policies that we refer to as the criminalization of homelessness. When I refer to the phrase criminalization of homelessness, I'm referring to criminal penalties as well as civil penalties, and also practices that tend to displace people from public space, punish them for their presence in public space, and make it difficult to impossible for them to exist outside, even when they have no option of living inside. The Law Center has tracked a core set of 187 cities across the country, urban, rural, every corner of the country since 2006. And we periodically, usually every 2 to 3 years, report on the prevalence of different types of laws that restrict the life-sustaining activities of unhoused people. So those include camping bans, sleeping bans, sit-lie bans, the type of restrictions that result in arrests, tickets, loss of property, and other harms, even when people are engaging in inherently innocent activities like what you and I are doing now, sitting down, standing still, and things that we simply can't avoid doing and survive, falling asleep. Every time that we report on this data set, we find that really without exception, the laws punishing the life-sustaining activities of homeless people has increased, and in many cases dramatically so. I'm going to go quickly over a few of the categories and the data sets as of 2019. I suspect that you're going to see even higher numbers in our updated report, but as of 2019, nearly 3/4 of all cities throughout the United States prohibit camping outside. We'll talk a little bit more about what that can encompass, but it can encompass both occupying a tent or a temporary structure, or even just resting with your property, falling asleep, even without a structure. Next slide, please. We also see a majority of cities restricting the simple act of sitting and lying down. These types of restrictions don't always apply throughout an entire community, though they sometimes do, where it's literally illegal to sit or lie down anywhere on public space within a given community. But often these restrictions are written to correspond with the geographic boundaries of business districts, tourist districts, and other areas where there is commercial activity. Next slide, please. I wanted to give this visual, and this is, by the way, for the person advancing the slide, this is the slide with the animations. These are two scenes that unfortunately are all too common to those of us who have now lived with decades of homelessness being part of our outdoor landscape, with people living outside because they cannot afford access to housing. And don't have access to any alternative to housing. We'll talk a little bit about why shelter is not housing and doesn't approximate housing. And so you see these types of scenarios commonly in many of our cities. I'm guessing all of us have seen this. And on the left, you have people in temporary structures that are occupying a portion of a sidewalk. On the right, you have a gentleman trying to stay somewhat sheltered with half of his body inside of a cardboard box. I want to show you that aside from the categories, well, in addition to the categories we track, these activities, what you're seeing here, can be punished under a large variety of criminal offenses. And if we can do the right arrow. So it can be unlawful camping, as we talked about, and we know that this would run afoul of unlawful camping ban in about 3/4 of American cities. Arrow. This could violate a sit-lie ban because sitting and lying down, just those postures, is targeted for penalty. Next slide, please. This can be disorderly conduct. You heard a little bit about the Martin v. City of Boise case. One of the laws that they were enforcing against this type of conduct was their disorderly conduct ban. Next. This could be unlawful obstruction. As you see, there is some amount of obstruction on the sidewalk. It's not enough to prevent people from using the sidewalk, but often people who are occupying some public space can be subjected to unlawful obstruction laws. And we're seeing, especially post-Martin, camping bans being amended or repealed in favor of unlawful obstruction laws because they are easy to enforce, hard to defend against, even when there is no need to take evasive action around the person who's on a sidewalk because they literally have nowhere else to go. Next arrow, please. Trespass, depending on the location of the property, sometimes even in public space, people are getting trespass bans for this activity that you're seeing here in these images. The trespass ban both excludes people from public space, sometimes for what might be seen as a short temporary period, 10 days, 30 days, sometimes for even longer periods, especially upon subsequent trespasses. It could be as much as a year. Or even 5 years. At one point, the city of Puyallup had a trespass ban that would have excluded people from all public parks for a period of 5 years upon a series of more than one, but not very many, violations of a trespass law. And of course, that becomes impossible to comply with if you cannot live inside. And also, violation of a trespass ban is an element of another criminal charge. Again, one that's very difficult to defend against. Next arrow. We're also seeing an increase in unlawful property storage laws. So that can mean really what it says, what it plainly says. It's unlawful to store personal property in public space. Of course, if you live outside and you don't have access to any sort of storage facility, then you will inevitably run afoul of this law, even if the property that is in your possession are the items that you need, your critical gear, like your clothing, your food, your medication, your ID, and your temporary shelter. And I think there's probably one more. And I thought maybe there was one more. I could have put several more. The point that I'm hoping to make is that there are myriad ways that governments can and are punishing people for engaging in life-sustaining activities. I'm going to move a little more quickly through these next slides. The fastest growing category of laws criminalizing people experiencing homelessness are laws that target people living in vehicles. That is a huge and growing issue in Washington state, both the number of people who are seeking shelter in their vehicles as the best available and only reliable form of shelter available to them, one that provides privacy, security, an opportunity to stay together with family and pets, a place to store property. Increasingly, those laws are enforced not only to sometimes result in criminal penalties or expensive tickets, but also to cost the person the shelter and all the property inside of it when they lose their vehicle to towing and impoundment. Next slide, please. And the ways that these laws get enforced also span the gamut. Arrest and incarceration is common across the country. Fines and fees, of course, are common. Those are both barriers to accessing housing. When someone who's unhoused has a future court date, there's a very high risk that they will fail to appear at that future court date because they don't have access to mail or a reliable way to get notices of hearings, or perhaps to get transportation to a hearing that will result in a warrant. There are numerous other types of enforcement mechanisms, move along orders, also perceived by a person living outside as a threat, just to stay away from a given community, or sometimes, enforceable orders to stay away, like trespass bans, in addition to property loss. All of this combines to make people experiencing homelessness 11 times more likely to be arrested than housed neighbors. Next slide, please. I won't belabor this point, but I hope I'm not surprising anyone when I say that emergency shelter is not housing. It doesn't fully approximate housing. It is a crisis intervention. It can be a really important crisis intervention and even a lifesaver for some people. It's not accessible to all people. It's not an appropriate placement for all people. There are a number of reasons why someone cannot access a shelter bed, even if one is available. And across the country, they're generally full. They also are, even when they're functioning well, even when there's a bed available, they are really temporary interventions, sometimes offering only a night of accommodation, meaning you can get into some form of shelter for some hours over the course of a 24-hour period. Not very many shelters offer day after day shelter and 24-hour shelter. And there are a lot of different barriers that might exclude someone at the front door. Disability barriers. I know I was surprised when I came to this work to know a lot of people in wheelchairs are turned away at the front door because there's just simply not staffing to assist someone with getting on and off of a mat or on and off of a toilet. Gender, age, ID requirements, cost, all of these things can be barriers to accessing emergency shelter, which is not an alternative to housing. Next slide, please. So this is all to say, if you are a person who loses housing, and we know right now that there are millions of people across the country as a result of the COVID pandemic who are at risk of losing their housing as soon as the eviction moratorium expires, will not have anything that can replace it. They may have some social networks, they can rely on them for a while, but those networks run dry eventually, and shelter is not housing. So without access to stable, safe, lawful indoor places, you will live outside and you will inevitably run into and find it difficult or impossible to comply with the types of laws that are enacted in cities across the country and in Puyallup. Next slide, please. I'm going to get to the case Boyle v. City of Puyallup. We're going to talk just really briefly about the legal infrastructure. So in 2019, we got a decision from the Ninth Circuit in Martin v. City of Boise. That's a case brought by the Law Center, the law firm Latham and Watkins, and Idaho Legal Aid, challenging a camping ban and a disorderly conduct law that really made it illegal to sleep and lie down in the city of Boise, despite the fact that there wasn't accessible shelter for everyone who needed that shelter and who lacked housing. What the court held, I know that there was a lot of media hype saying that decision prohibits the criminalization of homelessness, and it was misconstrued as guaranteeing a right to camp on the street. And that's not at all what it did. Simply what was held is that the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause is violated when a person is punished for their homeless status. A person is punished for their homeless status when they are criminally punished. And there are cases arguing also civilly punished for engaging in universal, unavoidable resting activities in public space when they lack access to an indoor shelter bed. So that's a pretty narrow opinion. That means if somebody has access to even just an overnight bed under Martin, they may be subject to criminal penalty for camping, sleeping, lying down, all these other universal, unavoidable resting behaviors if they have this alternative, because then it would be seen as voluntary conduct as opposed to involuntary conduct that is inextricable from status. There are a number of different cases, including some at the Ninth Circuit now, that are testing the parameters of Martin. That has been an important tool, but it has not been a full solution by any means to the criminalization of homelessness. It's a tool that we can use to push back on a type of bad practice and bad policy. Next slide, please. There are other legal arguments that can be made. There's really strong First Amendment jurisprudence that has been very successful in striking down panhandling laws. There also are strong protections in the Ninth Circuit surrounding property, both a right to property and the due process protections that are necessary if property is to be deprived. And that leads us to the Boyle case. Can I get to the next slide, please? A couple things I'll mention before we go to Boyle. And sorry, you can go to the next slide. The disapproving judge with the thumbs down, I include this image because I want it to be very clear. The majority of unhoused people never get meaningful access to legal counsel. All of the attorneys who are in this audience, you have a role to play in meeting a vast unmet legal need. Even when someone's subject to criminal penalty, they may not have meaningful access to their public defender. For example, if the case is dismissed at first appearance, they're not able to raise meritorious defenses to their cases, but they will suffer the conviction, the court costs, the barrier to housing and employment that those convictions entail. We also know that civil litigation, while increasing, is not done nearly at the level to push back on the increasing bad policies and practices. So there absolutely is a need for lawyers to step up, fill that need in order for there to be something like access to justice for unhoused people. Next slide, please. But here's a very important takeaway. As important as that is, you cannot do it well alone. It takes teamwork to make the dream work. And I don't say that just as a cliche. If you are not working with the community, meeting the people and identifying the remedies that are going to actually move the needle, help them, then you might secure legal wins that are empty, that don't actually help people locally. You might also do harm to the community. And so it's really important that you work closely with organizers, service providers, and others who are familiar with the needs of the community, and make sure that you're accountable to and serving the community that you're aiming to help with your legal skills. Next slide, please. So that's what we tried to do with some varying degrees of success in Boyle v. City of Puyallup. In a nutshell, the Boyle case was brought on behalf of 6 unhoused individuals in the city of Puyallup who were subject to sweeps. You probably know what I mean by that. I'm referring to the practice where people who live outside are subject to the wholesale destruction of their property, usually with very little notice. Often it's oral notice, and they're told you can't be here. I don't know where you can go, but not here. And take what you can grab. We're going to take the rest of it beginning in anywhere from right now to the next 15, 30 minutes. And that type of practice was enforced in the city of Puyallup. The legal basis really spans the gamut. It could be, camping ban. Oftentimes governments don't even pretend to point to a local ordinance. They'll just say there's a public health and safety justification for the sweeps practice. In Puyallup, the officer who was ordered essentially to conduct the sweeps, by all accounts, was a good person, but was tasked with giving people some small amount of oral notice and then confiscating their property. So people did what they could to save their property, but often it was lost. There is a Ninth Circuit case, Levan v. City of Los Angeles, that has found that unhoused people have a protected property interest in their unabandoned property, and it can't be unreasonably deprived without violating the Fourth Amendment, and deprivation needs to comport with minimal due process standards under the 14th Amendment. And so we knew, meaning the Law Center knew after we were recruited by Ted Brackman to come to Puyallup and identify whether there was a case, we knew that we wanted to bring a strong case on behalf of unhoused individuals that wouldn't, as we know, solve homelessness, but would help address an issue, to stand up against the bad policies, show that there are people who are willing to back unhoused people, to argue that they can't be treated as though they and their property are trash, that they have rights, and to offer some form of protection for them. So we recruited Perkins Coie to really lead this litigation. It resulted in what many might consider a win. We have an order of judgment against the city of Puyallup. The plaintiffs were paid money damages, and there were some administrative changes to the policy. But this is, so that's a legal win. But it is not the type of long-term change in and of itself that I think really tells the story of the Boyle case. What's really important, I think, to note, and I'm going to wrap up here, is that we could not have brought this case without the type of service provider that New Hope Resource Center is. We spent some time going through encampments, trying to meet people, talk to them, interview them, gain their trust. That was a very difficult process. So we were able to do the things that lawyers could do: records requests, records reviews, and Perkins Coie was invaluable to that process. But it really took the credibility, the relationships that New Hope Resource Center had developed with their community of clients, and allowing us to come in and speak with those clients, to do data capture, where we learned, for example, that the vast majority of people being served are from Puyallup, have been housed in Puyallup. Many of them have lived in Puyallup their entire lives. To the contrary, much to the contrary of the kind of predominant belief that people are coming in from the outside. We also were able to elicit facts and maintain contact with people, also have a place where we could share records. That partnership is why we were able to be successful as a DC-based firm and Seattle-based firm in bringing about some legal victory for unhoused people in the city of Puyallup. And so we're, of course, really grateful for the service providers who not only meet survival needs of people, but help to be a really critical part of the team to address their legal needs as well. So I'll turn it over now. I know we've got about 14 minutes for questions. Happy to answer them. Last slide. Please go to housing.handcuffs.org. Please endorse our campaign to end the criminalization of homelessness in this country. If there's a simple statement to endorse, you can be on the listserv, you can find resources there. And next slide, please don't hesitate to contact me. This is the type of work that we do across the country. That's my contact information. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Tristia. I think all three presentations should raise some good questions. We have, I think, about 15 minutes or so for any questions people have. Shanti, I'm not sure how you want to, I don't see any typewritten questions, but if people have the ability to ask questions orally, that's fine too.
So thank you all for your presentations. Just to remind our attendees, if you have questions, you can offer them in the group chat, or you can also raise your hand. I can give you the microphone.
While we're waiting for a question, I did want to mention the role that the Department of Justice played in this significant impact business license issue that arose in Puyallup. Relatively early on after they passed that ordinance, the Department of Justice got wind of it, and they began an investigation of the city of Puyallup to determine whether or not the civil ordinance violated the Religious Land Use Act, or LUPIA. And so that kind of created an overlay, even though there was no litigation on the Arlupia issue. I think when the Pierce County Superior Court found that this was a land use decision, I think the city attorneys and the city manager could see that the Religious Land Use Act could come into play. And so that may have played a part in addition to the LUPA action that led to the repeal of the civil ordinance. And I don't think it was a coincidence. A week or two after the repeal, the Department of Justice closed their investigation.
I have a question, Rick.
Okay.
And Tristia. Are there any broader lessons that you think you've learned from your involvement in this particular version of the presence of homeless people in communities of varying sizes and profiles, and your work in response to those issues in this particular setting? I felt I learned a lot, and I'm still learning. I just wondered if either of you had takeaways that you might be comfortable offering, and which might perhaps spark reactions or responses from the audience.
Well, I'll begin. I'm sure Tristia has a lot to offer in that regard. From my perspective, yes, the homeless crisis, and it truly is a crisis, calls into question laws, and certainly calls into question politics. But in order to effectuate change, I think, and Tristia alluded to it, the sense of teamwork and community, I'll call it community, of people that care enough to volunteer their time and are dedicated, through the thick and the thin. So I think a person's motivation is an important part of the process. And I know that the faith-based part of things can, particularly when you look at a lot of Christianity today, it gets kind of dismissed. But I think, a true reading, particularly of the Christian faith, as embodied in people like Ted Brackman and Paula Anderson and others, that really are in it for reasons of compassion and justice. And so I just think that's a very important part of the puzzle.
I agree with that. The one thing I'll say in hindsight that I wish we had done differently, and that I think is a lesson for everyone, is to think about the public education piece. Paula said earlier, that's the greatest gift we can give to community members. And I think it's critical to sustain the legal wins. You know, we can maybe even repeal a really bad law or change a particular bad practice. But because there are so many different ways that disfavored, vulnerable people can be harmed and targeted and harmed under the law, until we change public perception and really educate the public, we will just be fighting a new battle on a slightly different front and really not sustain a win. So, you know, the point about teamwork, I think both goes to, you know, the building of a case and the success of a case and an advocacy effort, but also to the point of a movement. You know, your advocacy doesn't necessarily end with the gavel coming down in your favor. There is work to be done afterward to make sure that that win is meaningful.
I see 3 questions in the chat. Thank you to people for posing those. Rick, you want me to just go ahead and read those? I don't know if they're as readily available to you as they are to me. First question is from Lindsay. Are there enough efforts to vaccinate the homeless against COVID-19 happening? What needs to happen? Does anybody feel like they know enough to offer a response there? That's a little outside my realm of expertise or even willingness to try.
Well, I'll give it a try. Paula would be the person to answer that question, but she had to leave for her duties with the Mobile Resources Response Team. But there has been a concerted effort, and the New Hope Resource Center has been a location where homeless people could get the vaccine. What's currently happening, I can't tell you because Paula is more the boots on the ground in that regard. And I know that unfortunately the COVID-19 pandemic seems to be on another rise here. So that's all I have.
Quickly, I'd say that you know, that's not something that we're, as an organization, tracking particularly closely, but we hear a lot of ID barriers. People can't present an ID, despite what the policy is, just by workers turning people away who can't present an ID, which is a huge barrier for unhoused people who may not have access to their ID.
Next question from Sarah. What legal aid groups are currently helping with legal work that goes to barrier issues such as helping rapid rehousing programs negotiate housing debts down for unhoused people, helping with orders of limited dissemination to keep evictions from showing up, tenant screening reports, etc. I know that Northwest Justice Project does that. We have a number of educational materials and online resources available, and we practice in those legal areas. In Tacoma, for example, we have a housing team of lawyers and paralegals that considers those cases and gets involved in both of those things. I'm sure other organizations are also involved. If you know of other organizations that do that work, feel free to just jump in the chat and add those names so that the person who's asked the question can get that information. Tamara asks, the Everett City Council recently made a comment that some recent action in Olympia would make it difficult for the Everett police to enforce the new no sit, no lie ordinance. Do you know what that may be regarding? I don't know what that may be regarding. My suspicion is that it may have more to do with recent legislative action taken in terms of police reform and the way police respond to various incidents, or the way police have decided that they will respond to various incidents in light of these new reform bills. I'm not aware of anything in terms of zoning or municipal authority legislation that's changed a city's ability to enact those laws. And then here's a question I think that might be best answered by Tristia. Is the result of the Boyle case, and they may mean here the Boise case, that municipalities can criminalize homelessness if they have enough shelter beds?
You know, that is a difficult question to give a yes or no answer to, but a very narrow reading, and a lot of courts will apply a very narrow reading to the Boise decision. You know, the answer to that would be yes, as long as there is access to and it has to be accessible. meaning, for example, in Boise, there were open beds in one of the shelters, but it was a religious environment that didn't comport with one of the plaintiff's own personal religious beliefs. So that bed wasn't deemed available to him for that reason. So it's not sufficient alone that there be open beds. They need to be accessible to the person, but such that there is an accessible bed. At this point, it's untested whether only an overnight bed is sufficient, but a narrow reading of Martin would say even that could be sufficient to allow for criminalization of a camping ban or other resting activity.
And is there litigation occurring around what accessible means? For example, if a city contracts with beds in a neighboring city that's X minutes away, is that accessible or not? Any framework there?
Yeah, we're hearing about that a lot. So, you know, a couple of cases that jump to mind that are testing the parameters, not that issue specifically as it relates to beds, but there's a case that is on appeal to the Ninth Circuit now, Blake v. City of Grants Pass, where that's Oregon City of Grants Pass, the city argued that there is land outside of Grants Pass that would be available for camping, and that therefore they should be allowed to enforce the camping ban inside of Grants Pass. Or I misstated by saying the camping ban. They've got a patchwork of different laws that function as a whole city camping ban. And the district court said no. Really good order on summary judgment. I'd recommend that everyone doing this type of work read that order, but we'll know what the Ninth Circuit has to say about the availability of the alternative. I'd also say that that is the case that's testing whether civil penalties are covered under Martin as well. Then there is also another case, this is not yet on appeal, but they just secured a preliminary injunction, and that's Warren v. City of Chico, and that's testing the issue of what is shelter, because the City of Chico wanted to establish really what amounted to an outdoor encampment / parcel of property just outside the airport that had 571 little squares drawn on asphalt, that they were pointing to, saying that counts as shelter under Martin. And alternatively, even if that isn't shelter, you can go to one of your squares. And so we're not criminalizing homelessness in all places at all times. And thankfully, the district court did not buy that, and in fact said that argument didn't even pass the straight face test. So, Martin's parameters are being tested, and we've had some successes.
Rick, any concluding thoughts from you as panel host? I see we're at 2 o'clock.
Right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for a great discussion, and I hope there's some good takeaways that we can use these tools, legal tools, in the future, because God knows we need it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Tristia, Rick, Paula, John, and thank you, attendees.